One of the issues that's been really problematic, I was chair last year, Sheriff Fletcher's first year as chair since being elected. We knew we had a budget issue, 2 months into that year. And the accountability and the working with that department last year, not only on the budget issue, but on so many things, was just almost impossible. And the unwillingness to even attend or participate in working together. And I would really look to the sheriff here that it's time for him to support aligning accountability of his office to the values of this county and working together with the county manager and the deputy county manager and the service team model that we've established that works so well for the rest of this county. But without the cooperation of the sheriff, has really suffered and caused some harm in this county. And then I really think it's time for our community, our residents, the folks that live in Ramsey County, to be able to have a conversation around, is having an elected sheriff really the best way to address public safety and be held accountable in this community? Police chiefs are appointed throughout the state. I'm not saying it's always a better model by any means, but if you look at it from a transparency and accountable model, there's so much more there when an individual that has that kind of authority and that kind of power and that kind of impact in the community to at least have some accountability to a management system, in this case a county manager, and to an elected board such as the Ramsey County Board, versus total authority, total autonomy, and no accountability to anybody except for every 4 years when he runs or she runs for office. And I think it's time for us to have that conversation as a community. And what does that look like? Using the ability of us being the only home rule charter county in the state, or even having a conversation with legislators in public safety reform, and what does that look like in true comprehensive public safety reform? And I don't want to look backwards. I do want to focus on the present and moving forward, but I want to bring up a few issues to explain why I support this. Because there is this pattern of abuse of power that just has continued for 18 months. And even when Sheriff Fletcher was a sheriff over 8, 9, 10 years ago, it's been reported, that he's allowed his for a better word, cronies or special people to retire. And within 30 days, he brings them back on at full salary, and they're collecting pensions. The lack of transparency and accountability, and just the disregard to how we manage and are accountable and responsible with taxpayer dollars. We worked really hard to terminate 2 employees, extremely hard. Spent tens of thousands of dollars on that. And just recently, he rehired both of them. His chief deputy testified to the arbitrator on why we should not have to rehire these employees 2 years ago when the arbitrator was making a decision on whether the county had to do that or not. And the arbitrator, in a really rare decision for the most part, which we're starting to see and understand here, not only in this, is he stood behind the county in that. But those 2 employees were rehired under the sheriff. One of them for sending hundreds of white supremacist, racist emails on a county computer, on county time, to county employees. And the harm and trauma it caused in this county when that occurred, but imagine the harm and trauma and when the sheriff decided to hire this individual back, what that cost to these individuals. The other employee was fired and terminated for stealing wages, recording false time, stealing taxpayer dollars, abusing our system, and was brought back to work in that same system that he so successfully, in his viewpoint, abused for years in stealing wages. We, and when I say we, I mean the county manager, his team, and this county board worked hard to protect the taxpayers from huge budget overruns. In 2019, as I mentioned before, for 10 months, the sheriff refused to work with the county to eliminate the projected budget overrun for the most part. There was a few meetings, but for the most part, he really would not work with us and recognize it. Refusing to meet at the same time, making decisions that exasperated his financial shortfall, making hires, investing in bikes. I mean, the list goes on and on. And continued to spend money knowing that his budget was going to come in at a potential $1 million or more in a shortfall. Then at the last meeting of the year, he brings the statue of peace to the meeting, knowing full well the county board had no choice in approving the $1 million overspent in his budget. What Bob do we believe in? The one that is holding a peace statue, or the one allowing and encouraging discrimination, racial bias, and racism and cronyism to flourish in his operation? The Bob that calls me to talk about police reform and leads with, we have to look at who we hire and how we hire. Or the Bob that hires individuals who have demonstrated the lack of values, that have demonstrated values of behavior that is totally at odds with the values of this county. The true test of character is what we do when we think no one is watching. In my opinion, Mr. Fletcher thinks no one is watching, and he fails the test of character. That's why I support the chair's recommendation for us to have this conversation about what are the next steps, for us to be bold, to ask the Department of Human Rights to come in and look and see and hold us accountable for what is happening in our county. I support changes in the management structure and the relationship with the sheriff's office, and I hope the sheriff supports that too, in a real meaningful way. I support the opportunity for the public to have a say in appointed versus elected sheriff. I am angered and saddened that with all the good work this county is moving forward on, that we spend so much time on the harm this sheriff is causing in our community. It just sucks the air out of the room. I will end sharing. I have been contacted by members of the community, which I know all of you have. And some are employees, some work in the jail, some are deputies that work on the street, and some are community members that are watching and are paying attention, and they feel the same way. One outreach from a jail employee, and this is a direct quote: "Racism runs rampant throughout the jail." And I'm going to read a feedback I got from a community member. I believe most of you did receive the same. But in some ways, this community member can't say it, says it so much better than how I could say it. "Hello, I'm taking time out of my day to tell you that Ramsey County needs to get their house in order. It is unconscionable that the Superintendent, Steve Leiden, removed black officers from interacting with Chavez, including one officer already in the process of omitting him. Do you understand how condescending that is? This action says he thinks the officers, one, were unable to act professionally. This would never happen with white officers and is an indication of why people are in such a rage right now. The racism in policing and corrections runs so deep, and they are so oblivious to their own thinking that a debacle like this is allowed to happen in this racially charged climate. I cannot understand how completely infuriating this is. I'm a white, middle-class, middle-aged woman. If I were a person of color, it would be exponentially worse, I'm sure. And then I find out the person in charge, who says he's reviewing the matter to see if any additional actions are necessary, is Sheriff Bob Fletcher, the man who can't control his own budget and has to beg the county board for additional $1 million of taxpayer dollars, and then turns around and rehires 2 corrections officers previously fired for misconduct who campaigned for him. This is why we're in this state right now. Policing and corrections is rotten to the core. It's old boys club of the very worst kind. Do the right thing. Be the change. Get your house in order and pressure everyone you can to throw out the bad, who have shown themselves to be so thoroughly entrenched in corruption and the systemic oppression of black people that we do not have time to redeem them. Do something. The world is watching." And you know, the statement, "Policing and corrections is rotten to the core," is pretty harsh, and I really don't believe it's rotten to the core. I believe we have a ton of good people trying to do extremely good work, and we're making progress. But that work is hindered and damaged when things and incidences like this come up. And then people use that broad paintbrush. That's not always justified. But those actions, such as Steve Leiden and his removal of those black officers, do so much harm to the good work that we are trying to do in this county. So with that, Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts here. I'm looking forward to my colleagues and your thoughts. But it's time for us as a board to take action, to show the sheriff not only are we watching, but we are holding people accountable. And it's time to demonstrate to our employees and to the community that we take this serious and we care and you matter. Thank you.